Hey everybody, I'm Chef Tom with All Things Barbecue, and today we're going to be preparing competition-style brisket. Starting with a whole packer brisket, we're going to separate the point from the flat, we're going to inject, season, and smoke on the Yoder Smokers YS640. So we're starting with a Creekstone Prime. This is their Master Chef Prime brisket, and this is a whole packer brisket, which means there's two pieces of muscle here. We've got the flat on the bottom, and that guy sits all the way along here, sits flat. And then we've got the point on top, which kind of sits on top of it, and that's right here. And you can see this line just barely through the fat cap. It's probably going to run right along there. That's going to be the point on top. And this is going to be the flat on bottom. And as we trim this away, you'll be able to see that there's going to be a line right here where they separate. And you can see that line in this fat cap. And as we trim this away, you'll be able to see those two different muscles run in two different directions, which makes it fairly easy to decipher which one is which. The goal for us is to separate the two pieces of meat so that we can cook them separately. So we're going to cut down just until we start to see the meat from the point, and then come up a little bit so that we're not cutting into that meat. And we're going to take all of the fat off of the point. So we're starting by trimming this fat off of the point, and we're going to work our way down to where the flat is. And when we get down to the flat, we're going to leave about 1/4 inch of this fat cap on here. But the point has enough fat, you can see running through all these veins, that we really don't need to leave any excess fat on the outside. It's just going to inhibit the opportunity for us to put rub on there. All right, so with the majority of the fat cap trimmed off the top, we can see that we've kind of run out of point meat here. And there's that line I was talking about earlier. This one comes pretty far down on top of the flat. But this meat is going to be very thin. I mean, very thin to start off with. And then, of course, it gets thicker as it comes back up here. But what we want to do is cut into this wedge and then begin to work our fingers underneath the meat here. And we'll just peel this meat back and separate the two muscles. And the thing to remember anytime that you're cutting in between the two muscles is that you just want to stay in the fat. If you get to the point where you're hitting red or hitting meat, then you know that you need to make an adjustment and perhaps come up higher or go down lower so that you're not cutting into the meat. So what I've started doing is just pulling up on this point meat and letting the weight do the work. I'm not really cutting very much. These short little cuts are allowing it to separate because they really do want to separate in that spot. Where it can sometimes get tricky is if your point, like I said, very thin at this end, comes down especially far on this one. What you're looking for is that line between where the flat is and where the point is, and where to make that separation. Now luckily, like I said, we cut the side earlier, and we can see that fat line right there that tells us that we're in the right area. And it's okay to take off this edge here. You may notice it's a little bit gray. That's just because there's some stuff that it picks up when it's being butchered. Maybe it's been steamed, maybe it's gone through a saw or something like that. And those are things that we can get rid of, not only just to help us see where we're going, but because you don't necessarily need to be eating that anyway. So at this point, the muscles are almost completely separated, and you're going to make the scariest cut at the very end here. This is definitely the one that's the most intimidating. But like I said before, just remember that you're only cutting into the white stuff. If you get into something red, just readjust your course. So there we have our two different muscles. There's the point and there's the flat. Your slices are gonna come out of your flat and your burnt ends are gonna come out of the point. At this point, we're just gonna get them cleaned up a little bit. We're gonna take this down to about 1/4 inch of fat on top of the flat, and then we'll continue to trim all of the excess fat off of the point. So you can bet that your prime slices, the ones you're gonna wanna put in your box, are gonna come out of this section right here. And that's why we've gone ahead and squared up these edges, because we're gonna want those to be the exact same length anyways. So we're at about 1/4 inch of fat all along the top side of this flat. And that's right where we wanna be. And that's not because this fat's going to be basting the meat as it cooks. It's actually because we're gonna cook it fat cap down on our Yoder Smokers YS640 pellet grill. And on that bottom shelf, as that fat renders and hits the diffuser plate underneath it, it comes back up and creates flavor. So in the areas where the fat is thickest, we are gonna put some scores in here. And that's because we know that rub does not penetrate fat well. And we wanna get as much flavor on this brisket as we can. So these scores are gonna allow us, without getting too deep into the meat, to get some flavor on that meat. All right, when it comes to cleaning up the point, really our only goal here is to get this hard fat off of the outside of the point meat. And that's because, like I said before, there's plenty of fat running through the meat, and that's what's going to baste the meat as it cooks. So the very last thing we want to do before we're done with this point is just to butterfly this big end open. As you can see, most of this end of the muscle is the same thickness, but we've got this big mound here at the end. So we're just going to come in here and butterfly that open so that it all cooks evenly. Now we're not cutting all the way through the meat, we just want to be able to fold it open. And there we have a fairly even surface all the way across the meat. For the injection, we'll be mixing our Butcher's Barbecue prime brisket injection with some beef stock. So we get that in our shaker and just shake it up until it's all incorporated. For our injection, we're just going to be injecting the flat of the brisket. Like we talked about before, the point has lots of fat running through it, which is going to allow it to baste itself and have lots of moisture. Now the flat is far more lean, which means that we need to add something to it to help retain that moisture. In this case, we're using the Butcher injection, and it has a little bit of phosphate in it as well, which is going to allow it to break down the proteins and really make this piece of meat tender. We'll just load up our injector. And then working in a grid pattern, we're gonna come into the meat, create a little pocket, and inject. And it'll kind of let you know when it's time to come out. And working in this grid pattern, just every inch or two, we're going to make injections, and that way we know that we've got this spread around the meat nice. All right, now we're just going to use some of this injection as our binder as we put our rub on as well. So we don't want it soaked, but enough to help that rub stick to the meat. In fact, we bring our point over and let that get some of the liquid on it as well. So the next step in our seasoning process is going to be adding our rubs, and we'll be using 2 rubs today. One is the Plowboys Barbecue Bovine Bold, and the other is the Our Butts Are Smokin' Our Beef Rub. So we'll be starting by putting down a layer of the Bovine Bold. And we're gonna do this one first because it's got a little bit finer texture to it, a little bit finer grain. And then on top of that, we'll add the Our Butts Are Smoking our beef rub. And it's a little bit more coarse. I really like the way these two rubs taste together. The Po' Boys has a little bit more sweetness to it, but it's got a lot of great savory flavors, which is what we're looking for in a beef rub. It's got plenty of salt. It's also got some celery flavor to it, which is really great. Now while we let those rubs soak in on our flat, we're gonna go ahead and season the point, and then we'll go back to the flat, flip it over, and do the same thing. The thing I really like about this new Our Butts Are Smoking our beef rub is it's got big pepper flavor and it's got big garlic flavor. And those are just some of my favorite flavors to go with brisket. Now you can see it's getting a little bit moist. It's just been sitting for a couple of minutes. We're gonna flip that over and do it on the other side. All right, and let's give these guys probably about 5 to 10 minutes for that rub to really attach to the meat before we take it out to the smoker. So we'll be smoking our brisket on a Yoder Smokers YS640 pellet grill today. We're gonna put the flat on the bottom shelf, fat side down, and we'll put the point right over the top of it on the second shelf. The smoker has preheated to a temperature of 225 degrees, and that's where we're gonna run it until it's time to wrap these guys later on. For this initial smoking process, the briskets are gonna be in there for probably about 5 to 6 hours, but what we're really looking at is the color on the outside. We want a nice dark color on the outside of these briskets, and at that point, we're going to wrap them in foil. So here we are about 5.5 to 6 hours into the smoke, and you can see that we've got some really great color on the brisket. This is right where we want it, so in order to stop that browning process, we're now gonna take it inside and wrap it in some foil. So at this point, we're going to be wrapping the brisket. We wanna wrap it for a couple of reasons. One is to stop the browning process, which we just discussed. The other is that now we can add some extra flavors into this foil and really incorporate that into the meat as well. We've spent a lot of time creating a nice bark on the outside, and we don't want to ruin that, so we're going to wrap it nice and tight, but we're also going to add some liquids in there so that it can braise and continue to add some flavor, as well as cooking it just a little bit faster. All right, we're starting with some beef stock. We've got about a cup here. And to that, we'll add a little bit of the prime dust. Now this is essentially just powdered beef stock, so really what we're doing right now is just increasing the beefiness in this brisket flavor. On top of that, we're gonna add a little bit of the condensed stock. Here we have our point. We're gonna treat both of the muscles exactly the same at this point. We'll add maybe a 1/4 cup of the liquid into the foil. So again, we're gonna add probably about a 1/4 cup of this liquid. And then we're gonna wrap it nice and tight. And just to ensure that we don't lose any liquid, we're going to double wrap it in foil. So we'll place our wrapped flat and our wrapped point on the second shelf of the cooker and let it continue to cook until it's nice and tender. And just to expedite the cooking process, I'm gonna turn the pit up to 300 degrees so that we get to that end goal a little bit faster. At this point, the brisket has been cooking for about 1.5 hours wrapped in foil. The reason we probe is to feel for doneness. I'm looking for very little resistance when probing the brisket. It should feel similar to probing room temperature butter. Once the meat has reached that desired tenderness, remove it from the cooker, leave it loosely wrapped in foil, and rest 30 to 60 minutes. This allows the juices to distribute evenly throughout the meat. For the point meat, we'll slice it into cubes, place in a foil pan, and toss in sauce. Today we're saucing our brisket with a 50-50 combination of Plowboy's KC Crossroads and Blues Hog Smoky Mountain. KC Crossroads is a great Kansas City tomato sauce, and Blues Hog has a really unique sweetness to it. Now we'll return these burn-ins to the cooker to allow the sauce to set up for 5 to 10 minutes. For the flat, we'll start by brushing our sauce over the top of the meat. Next, slice pencil-thick slices against the grain. To choose the best slices for turn-in, you can use the hang test. The slice should hang loosely, with no bounce, and not fall apart. Also, you can see that as I pull the slice from both ends, there is slight resistance before it pulls apart in the center. Perfectly tender, but holding together. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please click the subscribe button. And if you have any questions or comments, or there's anything else you'd like to see me cook, let me know in the comment section down below. For more recipes, tips, and techniques, head over to thesauce.atbbq.com. All things barbecue, where barbecue legends are made.